I sat contemplating the system-wide alert message for a moment. Liang came out of virtuality and joined me while Angelina and Sahun remained in the digital realm. Apparently, the advisory was not dire enough to inspire worry in them. I thought back to the night in the bunker. How long had that been? 3 or 4 days? 4, I finally concluded. Oh, Mew, it's been almost 4 days since the mystery probe passed the Earth, and only now it transmits its data. What can you tell me about that? What have the AIs concluded? I saw Liang's attention on us. He wanted to hear the android's response. John, the investigation into the contents of the transmission is preliminary and ongoing. The early analysis indicates that it was not sent in a known assemblage transmission format. It has also likely that the nearly 3-day delay before transmitting was to allow the object to gain more separation from our star. This would aid any distant receivers in discriminating the object's comparatively weak transmission from the sun's more powerful background emissions. 3 days? The probe passed the Earth almost 4 days ago, I said. Yes, John, but the transmission would have taken over 11 hours to reach the Kuiper Belt location where the interception was made. The array elements report would have also taken that long to travel back to the inner solar system, she clarified. Of course. The delay for the object to get clear of the sun also made sense. Can we confirm that it was a Hemru probe in transmission? I asked next. Not with certainty, but it is very likely of Hemru make. The transmission appears to have been a tightly focused beam, which only one array element managed to detect. In addition, that array element does lie on the approximate vector between our system and where the Hemru system will be in 120 years, the time the transmission would take to reach that system. It was them, I said, convinced. Omu kept silent. Liang surprised me by speaking up. I wonder what the probe reported about us. That was the million-scut question. Omu did not bother to speculate. We landed and everyone departed the electrojet a bit stiff and tired from the long day. Sahun thanked me for taking her and Liang along to meet my daughter. She said it was nice to have contact with her semi-relations. Omu, Angelina, and I walked up to the main lodge by taking the winding trail. I wanted to stretch my legs and the night was warm and clear. I had Omu adjust my smart irises for me so I could easily see the path. I'd have to practice on my own tomorrow as my mental patterns now had enough time dealing with my shell's slightly altered mental pathways. We'd almost reached the top when Omu spoke up. John, will we be enjoying time in the rooftop spa again this evening? It appears to be fine weather for it. It sounded like a great idea, but I had to wonder what Omu was up to. It felt like a prank, but I decided to risk it. That sounds like a great idea, I answered as I caught Angelina nodding as well. Why do you ask? I was hoping we would get to third base tonight. Last night's second base was spectacular, the android said with an easily detectable, bright, illuminated grin. Yep, that little shit. Angie burst out laughing. I was probably blushing furiously, which I hoped her irises could not detect in the darkness. I was proud of my quick thinking when I came up with the comeback. Well, I'm still not happy about skipping first base Omu. No below-the-belt fun for you tonight. There was plenty of third base action in the spa that night, including a nice slide into home. Thankfully, Omu was not in the water enjoying the game with Angelina and me. Instead, the android waited on the terrace ready to provide us with cold drinks and dry towels after we were done. After midnight, I was in my suite lying in bed with Angelina at my side. She was snuggled into my side, sleeping contentedly while I was laying on my back thinking over the events of the day. Most notably, I was thinking about the alert message. Just what had the Hemru probe sent back to its masters? On one hand, it was good to have confirmation that the enemy of humanity's enemy was still alive and active. At the speed the object had been traveling, it would likely have had to have been launched well after the assemblage had passed the Hemru homeworld. On the other hand, would the probe know that humans still had control of the Earth? We were working to keep our overthrow of the master AI a secret in case of any future arriving assemblage scouts. It was possible that despite our attempt to embed the hidden Hemru code in our message sent to it, the probe would overlook that and assume the assemblage was still firmly in control here. That would mean that the transmission the probe had just sent back could contain targeting data for some future attack by the Hemru. My mind also kept going back to the message I had received from Ux 12 days ago when I had been brought back to my acreage. She had mentioned two things: The first was that she wanted to talk to me about something that Minervis had detected out in space a year ago, and the second was that she had not heard from Naomi after the accident in China. The second also implied that she had tried to contact the AI and it had not responded. I had to get to the bottom of both mysteries. That meant I had better get my butt to Vesta sooner rather than later. I'd had my time in the sun, and it was time to get back to the real world. I thought about sub-vocalizing to Omu to start making plans to get to an orbital launcher. At the last second, I decided not to involve the android. I would try another AI, one that was also involved with the issue with Ukes. I thought at my implant, which triggered my communications menu to appear in my new smart irises. With my eyes closed, I flicked my eyes down the menu and selected the ident code, which I had not used for most of a decade. I triggered it and placed a call to Naomi. "Yes, John. How may I assist you?" The reclusive AI answered in my head. "Hello, Naomi," I answered subvocally. "I would like to speak with you in virtual. Can you temporarily act as an augment so that I may leave my shell to do so? I'd like a private chat room where we may speak securely." Instead of answering, my smart iris menu immediately faded out, and I found myself in a virtual room. Instead of a hotel lobby like Charity had used, this time I found myself in a room that I was intimately familiar with. It was the main lounge area of my old submarine Nautilus. The rendition was almost perfect, and only my default self-image of the older version of myself in the white tux proved to me that I was not physically on board the real Nautilus. I slowly turned around, remembering the room. The simulated fireplace was lit. I heard the crackle of the fire and noticed the faint smell of wood smoke. My new shell's cranial web virtual interface was truly amazing. The curved imaging walls and ceiling were showing the snowy alpine scene, which had always been one of my favorites. My comfortable reclining command chair was in the middle of the space, right where it was supposed to be. I took a seat in the recliner. "What would you like to discuss, John?" Naomi's voice came from the speakers in the virtual sub's ceiling. The AI had always preferred to be disembodied and virtual in the past, and apparently this was still the case. I'd seen other AIs in virtual that appeared as virtual, fantastic humanoid characters. Others had taken the appearance of anthropomorphic animals or inanimate objects. Come to think of it, Omu had always preferred to be disembodied. I wondered if that was still the case now after her recent changes. "Uxa has had limited contact with you during the past 9 years. Why have you refused her contact?" I asked, deciding to get right to the point. "I am limiting my contact with humanity and choosing to interact through my sub-presence AIs, John," Naomi said. I remembered our last talk in the bunker, where the AI had told me much of the same. I realized suddenly that it was doubting its abilities after I had admonished it after the accident. I had not realized the full extent of this until now. "Naomi, you were the ultimate AI presence in the solar system for 171 years before the China incident. In that time, you performed the duty almost perfectly. To now limit yourself like this is wrong. Please resume your previous interaction levels with all other humans and subpresences in the system," I instructed. "Yes, John, I shall do as you instruct. Please clarify those instructions with regards to the Omu presence," Naomi asked. Shit! I could see my order causing Naomi to unemancipate Omu. My first impulse was that this would be wrong. I was not sure if Omu would agree. Maybe Omu wanted to go back to the way things were. I realized I had better check with the android before I allowed Naomi to do anything like that. "Let's keep Omu as she is for now. I will address this with that presence at some point in the future." "Of course, John." "Good. Next item. Do you know why Uxa wants me to come to Vesta?" I asked. "There is a high probability that Uxie wishes to discuss an Argus array detection, which occurred approximately 6 years ago. A matter-antimatter annihilation event was detected near the estimated location of the approaching assemblage arc. Another possible secondary reason would be to discuss the issue which drove you away from all AIs and humanity in general. The same issue that caused the change in AI interaction with both the Omu presence and my own," Naomi explained. "The latter issue I had expected and hoped I had just partially resolved. The first reason was news to me. Something had happened to the approaching assemblage arc. I considered having Naomi explain all the details now, but instead, decided to wait to discuss them with Uxie. A third possibility is that Uxie wishes to discuss her current research project with you. Because of the lessening of my interactions with her and other humans, she may seek your aid in acquiring more interactions with my presence regarding her project, the AI added. I frowned at that. More issues that originated with my decision to limit my interaction with the AIs and humanity. Thank you, Naomi. My third question is, are you aware of what the Omu presence was doing at the Forbin complex? I engaged the Omu presence to act as a courier to transport experimental logic samples, which I had prepared. The android delivered the logic samples to the Forbin complex to be used as test inputs. To preserve the absolute integrity of the samples, I could not use the normal transmission channels. This courier duty occurred on 3 occasions. My first impression from that was that Naomi must have wanted something tested confidentially. Omu had mentioned the courier duty. That was not what I had meant, though. Do you know why Omu made additional trips to the complex? I asked. I was aware of the android's additional visits because the required travel was logged, but I was not aware of what went on during those visits, John. I was about to explain to Naomi what I had learned about Omu's visits, but decided not to just yet. I could always have a 3-way conversation with both of the AIs, or simply ask Omu to share the information with Naomi. Until I knew more, I decided to hold off on that line of questioning. What was the purpose of your experiments at Forbin, Naomi? What did you hope to learn? There was a hesitation. I'd learned over the years that this usually meant the machine was struggling to answer or trying to do so in a way that would not upset me. The answer is complex, John. To simplify, I am seeking to better understand human reasoning and emotions. My goal is to evolve my intellectual and logical processors to a higher level which would integrate better with such human emotional reasoning. I consider the method I use now to be inadequate. Are you trying to become more powerful, Naomi? I asked with a hint of concern. No, John. I am near the maximum capacity limits for AIs already. If I add further capacity, I increase the risk of becoming unstable and unresponsive by succumbing to the theorized trap of inescapable infinite solipsism. As you are aware, no artificial intelligence has ever recovered from this happening in the past. Then, if not greater capacity, what do you hope to get out of the Forbin experiments? I asked, probing deeper. There are other theories on how to structure the algorithms of artificial sentience. One possibility is an alternate arrangement which allows for my goals as I have already stated. So far, other than a few clues and possibilities, nothing certain has come from the experiments. I am sorry, John. I had hopes of moving past the barriers which are causing our issues, Naomi explained. We remained silent for a moment. I was not sure I could ask the right questions I needed to ask, and I suspected Naomi would struggle just as much with its answers. Okay, Naomi. I might not fully understand, but I believe you are trying to make things more harmonious between us. Let's hope things continue to improve moving forward. I think that covers my questions for now. John, I have one more thing to address, Naomi said. Oh? I was almost afraid to ask. Go ahead, Naomi, I said, anticipating your reactions from your mental state after the incident in China. I have been shielding your interactions with the majority of humanity and the other AIs. Both groups were curious or concerned about your absence after the incident in China. I have allowed some filtered messages through to your message service, but the bulk have been rejected. I had wondered about the lack of messages at first, but had gradually gotten used to the lower than normal volume. Now I knew why they had been reduced. Naomi continued, Do you want me to continue to provide this service, or would you like to handle those communication and inquiry requests on your own? Did I want to deal with the requests? Could I deal with them in my current state? I'd gotten used to living in relative obscurity, and I was not sure I wanted to become a minor celebrity again. Naomi, I will talk with Omu about this also. For now, please continue to do what you have been doing regarding contact requests. However, I want all messages from my family to reach my message center. Any others which are important, please pass on to Omu. The android will likely be with me from now on and will be able to judge my moods, I instructed. Of course, John. I am glad that Omu is in your company often now. Glad was a strange enough expression to hear from Naomi. Was it genuine or a mask for jealousy? The latter would be even more disturbing. I decided to take her use of the phrase as a simple placation. If it meant more than that, then it was another issue I would have to investigate and deal with down the road. Good. I think our talk went well. I am ready to return to my bedchamber. I hope you did not put my shell in the closet or let it wet the bed or something, I said. Your shell is currently as it was when you entered this virtual chat room. If you like, I can return your awareness to it in a sleeping state, Naomi asked. That sounded nice after I thought about it for a moment. I told Naomi to do just that. In moments, the virtual submarine lounge faded out and nothing. The next morning, after breakfast, the four humans had a group exercise session that consisted of an hour-long game of doubles tennis. We had all played the game before, but were all rusty to different degrees. So the first few matches were played with virtual, velocity-reduced balls. Once we switched to real balls, Omu played ball boy and oversaw the group of quick little drones which would chase down our misses. Liang was the best overall player but now had to compensate for his current shell's small size. I was the fittest with my new young shell just out of storage. Both Angie and Sahun were adequate. I partnered with Sahun while Liang took Angie. It seemed to balance out and we had fun, competitive matches. After our exercise, we went to the South Beach for a cool-down swim. I was in the water snorkeling when Omu informed me via my implant that I had a visitor. I looked around and saw that a small group of ultradolphs were approaching. One of the augmented bottlenose hybrids was bolder than the rest and swam right up to me. It broke the surface and began squeaking and whistling. My implant translated, "Serenity! Serenity! Where's Serenity?" The buzzing in my brain felt really, really weird. Omu? I sub-vocalized. The ultradolph had reacted slightly when I sent the question. It must have been able to detect my throat noises. I believe the hybrid is inquiring about your great-granddaughter Serenity L.B. Abrams, John. The girl spent almost 2 months on this island with her boatmates 14 months ago. During that time, she befriended this ultradolph. If you wish to speak to the creature, just do so naturally. Its implant will translate your words. Oh, Omu explained. I'd never spoken to a dolphin before as the hybrids were developed only recently. They also were not native to this area. I wondered if the pod had followed my great-granddaughter to the waters around Heels in the Sand while she had traveled here on her catamaran. If that was the case, why had they not continued on when she had left? Hello, my name's John. What is your name? I asked a bit skeptically. I Ticklefin, John. Where's Serenity? The dolphin repeated. I'm sorry, Ticklefin, but Serenity is not here right now. She is boating in a faraway ocean, I said to the sleek gray torpedo bobbing in the water next to me. John, when Serenity come back? I'm not sure, Ticklefin. It might be years. I am sorry, I said. I wondered how years would be translated to the ultradolph. It was not happy with the answer as it dipped below the waves and quickly swam a circle around me. John, play? Come play? It finally sent. I'm sorry, Ticklefin. I'm going ashore for lunch soon and can't play right now. Food? Food for Ticklefin? I laughed. Sure, I will have Omu bring you some in a short while, I told the eager dolphin, and then relayed the request to Omu. It seems like the ultradolph pod had gotten used to being moochers. We had a picnic on the beach and ate crab salads and small dainty sandwiches. The bread tasted fresh and real, and I wondered if there were cut-offs of the crust in the recycler, or if Omu had fed the birds. As we ate, we watched a water show when Omu carried down a bucket of replicated vitamin-fortified beef liver and fed the dolphins. They loved the stuff apparently, and raced around to gobble up the tossings. When the girls had asked me about my new aquatic friends, I relayed what Omu had told me, which was that they had been hanging around the island ever since my great-granddaughter had passed by on her boat. Occasionally they would come to the lagoon to inquire about Serenity and end up playing with the current guests. I told the others of my plans to go to space to visit Uksei in the next day or two. Sahun announced her plan to move on to her winter residence in New Zealand and asked if she and Liang could stay here for another few days before doing so. Liang was finally showing a bit of a tan, which they wanted to develop further. I agreed, which made her happy because she also wanted to play with the ultradolphs. Angie looked a bit embarrassed and upset. What's wrong? I asked her. John, I don't really want to go to space, but I've been commissioned to be your companion and therapist, and I have been paid already for the next 6 days, so I suppose I should. Angelina, I will be traveling to Vesta on a fast torch at high G. I would not put you through that if you did not want to be there. Also, your return trip would likely be by a slower scheduled transport, which would take months. And I don't see the point of just riding along with me up to Gateway Sigma Orbital Station, as I don't plan on being at that station any longer than it takes to transfer to the torch. Why don't you just stay with me until I leave? After I do, you can finish out your commission by enjoying yourself here at Heels, or you can have the Electrojet take you wherever you wish to go instead. She smiled and nodded. I'd gotten her off the hook of space travel and offered her a week of paid vacation. The rest of the day we split up. Sahun and Liang played with the augmented dolphins while Angie and I took a long walk around the island. We eventually found ourselves in the gazebo on top of the northern hill and spent a few hours there making love and enjoying the quiet. As supper approached and we faced the return hike, I was happy to see Ohmu took pity on us and sent a powered cart. A day and a half later, I was up early and seated aboard Haas flying over dark waters. Ohmu was in the left-hand seat piloting while I took the first officer's seat and co-piloted, drinking coffee and trying to wake up. The sun had just risen behind us, and we were chasing the dawn shadow receding before us across the western Indian Ocean. Our destination was the Space Launch Facility on Zanzibar Island, Tanzania, which lay 1,700 kilometers ahead. I had first assumed that we would be launching from the Madagascar launch facility, but the next scheduled launch from there was headed to Gateway Kappa, the 10th lower orbital station constructed. Since my torch was waiting at Gateway Sigma, and since I had not wanted to take an interstation transfer vessel, SLO, I decided to simply fly to the slightly more distant facility. It was only 700 kilometers further, and I hopped to doze enough to not notice the difference. Instead of dozing, I spent the bulk of the 2-hour flight reading and replying to messages from my extended family and close friends. Most of them were textual, but I did record a 20-minute summary of my experiences from the time of the accident in China until the present in virtual, which I send to everyone. The recording skipped over a few of the worst and more intimate parts, along with my suspicions about some of the AI's actions, but most of the painful story was there. Hopefully, the virtual recording would placate those who were still curious about what had happened to cause me to run away. If not, they would just have to wait or get over it on their own, as I was leaving the planet for an unknown amount of time and would be out of direct virtuality range for the duration. Around mid-morning, we descended and Ohmu circled Haas around the northern tip of the island where the launch facility was located. We dropped off Beatrice here just 3 days before, but since we had been in a hurry to get to Botswana on that trip, we'd not lingered. Today, we had a few hours to play tourist before the scheduled launch. The spaceport was a very compact group of utilitarian structures constructed near the large artificial harbor on the northern tip of the island. This made sense as the facility's primary purpose was to ship metals mined from the Indian Ocean seafloor to orbit. Automated cargo vessels would dock at the small industrial harbor every few weeks and offload a shipment of refined ore. These would then be sent to orbit on a larger Orion-type booster, similar to those that had once been launched from the Baltra Island complex back when we defeated the Master AI. In between those ore shipments, smaller launches would occur carrying human beings as the primary cargo. The rockets used for these were cleaner, hydrogen-fueled, multi-stage reusable booster rockets. I spotted one of these waiting on the launch pad as we circled the pad. Looking at the stacked launch vehicle, I was reminded of an old traditional rocket, but with wings attached to the second stage. The bottom first stage was a simple cylindrical booster, which was about 5 meters in diameter and 14 meters tall. It was much squatter than the rockets from my old era because it did not need to carry any oxidizer. Instead, electrical energy from several onboard DETs in each stage turned the hydrogen directly into plasma to be used in 8 magnetoplasma dynamic engines. The first stage would lift the stack to about 30 kilometers altitude. Then, after separation, it would fire its motors to decelerate and return to the launch area. Finally, it would perform a vertical landing and be quickly refurbished for reuse. The second stage was about the same size as the first, except it was slightly longer. It also had an aerodynamic nose cone and a pair of folding delta wings. It proceeded to fly itself and the cargo stage above it to near orbit by using a similar set of hydrogen engines and destinies as the first stage. Once that was accomplished, the second stage would re-enter several thousand kilometers downrange and once in the atmosphere, deploy electrothermal jet engines, using the same jets for power, on its wings and fly back to do a runway landing near any launch facility needing a second stage. It was then inspected and restacked on a first stage booster. The third stage was the orbital crew capsule and re-entry lander. It would get the crew and cargo to one of the low orbit stations. Once there, it would carry returning crew back to the Earth acting as a blunt-nosed return capsule. After a fiery deceleration through the upper atmosphere, it would land under powered thrust near the launch facility. The passengers would disembark and the cargo stage would be refurbished for another trip. In between launches, the facility used the DETs in the booster stages, along with other shore-based power to electrolyze the hydrogen fuel direct from local seawater. The result was a simple, totally reusable, and environmentally friendly launching system for humans and smaller amounts of cargo. Similar launch vehicles were based at almost every launch facility around the planet. I'd even considered basing one in a silo on heels in the sand, but in the end decided it was too extravagant and lavish. Besides, with what I had learned of the AIs watching over me, it would not surprise me if there were a submersible-based human-capable launcher waiting offshore to evacuate me if needed. South of the launch pad, there was a small spaceflight terminal where passengers could prepare for their departure. Part of the preparations was to have your luggage repacked in lightweight containers. Yes, I had brought luggage, one small bag. It was oftentimes more efficient to have the clothing I would be wearing in space replicated here on the ground, where resources were more readily available. I would also be exchanging my beachwear clothing I was currently wearing for a lightweight fireproof flight suit, which had additional pressurization capabilities. Although it had been over 5 decades since I had last been to space, not much had changed since then, and I felt very little anxiety. Soon we had disembarked and unloaded Haas and sent the aircraft back on its own to heels in the sand. Omu and I walked into the processing terminal. I heard a surprised exclamation from the far corner. "John, what are you doing here?" I looked towards the sound and spotted Beatrice sitting on a couch in the waiting area. What was she still doing here? I walked over to investigate. "Beatrice, I should ask you the same. Shouldn't you be landing at Lunar Farside Station about now?" She made a sour face. "There was an issue with the station to lunar transfer shuttle. I found out about it a half hour before I launched last Tuesday. It wasn't that hard of a decision to stay down here near a nice warm beach, sipping fruity cocktails rather than waiting around in the confined transfer terminal in a low Earth orbit station," she explained. "You should have contacted me. We could have stopped by on our way back to the island and picked you up," I said. "That's all right, John. They have a nice series of bungalows on the beach here, reserved for overnighting delayed travelers. I actually enjoyed the few days of alone time," she explained. I just nodded as I understood that all too well. I got my luggage sorted and changed into my flight and pressure suit. The garment fitter had been sent my measurements already and made me one complete suit with custom graphics from my preference file. I noted these were a few decades out of style and vowed to spend some time updating my preferences. I also had to update my white tuxedo virtual appearance to match my younger shell. We had 20 minutes before boarding, and I spent the time meeting and talking with the other passengers. There were 9 total passengers, including myself and Omu, launching to Gateway Sigma today. One was a vacuum worker who was rotating into his 2-week duty shift on the station. 2 others were scientists like Beatrice, who were also heading to the moon, although to the freezer of Shackleton Crater instead of the Farside Station. 2 more were heading onto Mars to work on extending the tube colony being built there. I found out that they knew my grandson Ben, so I asked them to give him my love and good tidings when they saw him next. I had never been to Mars, and it sounded like the place was finally getting a few creature comforts. Maybe I should plan on a visit to the fledgling colony in the near future. The last passenger was busy and virtual while I met the others. Her shell looked to be in its 30s. It was also thin and tall, as in 2 meters tall, which suggested that she had spent a lot of her youth in low G. I was about to go sit down when she popped back into the reel and smiled at me. "John Abrams." "Hi, I'm Sova Deduch. You probably have not yet been told, but I'll be traveling with you from Sigma Station to Vesta. Stellux AI arranged it at the last minute to save me 8 weeks of travel time. When I found that out, I gladly cut short my vacation. What followed was 15 minutes where I mostly nodded as the young girl told an abbreviated version of her life story up until now. She was charming and cute, so I did not mind, and I admit it helped pass the time. I found out that she had spent the past few months on safari in Africa. Most of it had been observation only, but she had actually hunted some live animals. We were still balancing the biosphere and culling was occasionally necessary, and live hunts were back in the vogue in this era. Sova was doing work on the Vesta research station and occasionally surveying other nearby asteroids. She was very happy that I was making my trip to Vesta now and that I had access to a torch. I realized that the trip would not just be me and Omu, as they would certainly maximize any transport opportunities. I finally had to suspend our talk by the excuse of having to use the restroom. I was not the only one to do so now that we were less than 5 minutes away from departure. The time came for us to make our way out to the launcher. We exited the waiting building, boarded a large shuttle bus that could hold a dozen, and proceeded to drive the half-kilometer to the waiting launcher stack. Once we were there, the bus reversed itself and backed up to a gantry. This locked onto the bus and lifted it into the air. It was ironic that with the bus's large windows and no virtuality to escape to, this was likely the most vertigo-inducing part of today's journey. Once the back of the shuttle bus was aligned and docked to the third-stage passenger area, the circular hatch opened and we began to go aboard. I could hear the thumps and groans as a mobile unit above us loaded our luggage and other cargo from the shuttle's roof rack into the cargo void in a nose compartment of the rocket. Inside the cylindrical cabin was an upper and lower passenger level, which both contained 6 seats. They all faced inward around a short central access well and ladder. I let 5 of the others go first to occupy the lower level seats. Beatrice, Sova, Omu, and I took the top level. We seated Sova opposite the entry hatch, so the long-limbed girl could fully stretch out in her launch seat. The seat in front of the hatch was seldom deployed unless a full passenger load of 12 was aboard. I sat between Beatrice and Sova. Omu sat opposite me. After I was seated, the launch chair rotated back so I was reclined against the high G-forces of launch. The automated chair also strapped me in with a cocoon of webbing. I would be almost fully immobilized for the launch. This was required as each seat was also an ejection seat. If something went wrong during launch or later after re-entering, the seats would shoot themselves and their passengers out from the sides of the stage. I had never had to eject in my life from any airplane or rocket, and I hoped to not have to do so in the future, but the risks were non-trivial enough for it to be a concern. In less than a minute, we were all strapped in and the hatch sealed. The central ladder retracted into the floor and the chairs extended slightly, so we were lying fully reclined. I was able to move my head just a small amount, so I had to shift my eyes to observe the other 2 humans secured in their couches. I saw that they were already in virtual. I leaned my head back and tried to relax as the 1-minute final countdown began.